Well, folks, today we are here at another one of our Diaspora community outreach meeting, and this here is something that has attracted quite a lot of attention. But today we have a special topic, and that topic that we want to bring is what happened and how we can analyze the outcome of the decision on Thursday by that very important Justice Roxanne George Wilkshire. So with that, I would like to ask the participants in the lawsuit, on the folks who are more involved with the process, to shed some light and paint the picture so that the audience will follow. Thank you.
Good evening, good afternoon to our viewers. Am I communicating clearly? Hello? Hello?
Anil,
Video
just
in
make
Guyana.
it hear it loud and good.
1 second, we're playing a video first, and then
Give me 1 second and get my technical person to come in.
I mean, look at Manny Chan talking about teachers.
Teachers,
She
yes.
has the temerity and audacity.
Suddenly,
Who once said that if they can't live with the pay, then they
then they
should
should
go.
quit. Yes.
You see, so in this season here, it's open season where people talk and there's little or no response. But when it comes to election, I haven't touched the indigenous question yet, where I think the government has done a lot. I think there is also more value for money in a lot of the projects. They are not the best. It will take time to change this corrupt structure that the PPP left in place. But I believe that enough has been done to ensure that the government will be re-elected. And that as the statistics come out, employment has been created. I don't think you have solved the employment problem. You wouldn't in the short term. But I think also people feel safer in the society. They feel that there is more rule by law than the days when Jack Leo believed he was Lord and God, and if a boy push your finger up in the air, you end up in prison. So there are a lot of issues. It's just when the time comes for you to package it and sell it. I don't believe any sane person of any ethnic group will suggest that a lot hasn't been done in terms of increasing security of people, less armed robberies, etc. I don't believe anybody can argue under the PPP, people could have killed persons with impunity and not likely to come to trial.
Yes.
We have increased the capacity of the police force, and I don't think anyone would want to kill somebody and believe they could run to a minister or etc. and solve it. So people will see that the security issues have been. If you're in Georgetown and we start to talk about flooding, or in this country, people, I'm just saying to you, there are a lot of issues when you start to campaign on it. Not to mention, I mean, it is easy now for Jagdeo to go and be making a set of noise and talking like if he's a principled person. But when the election campaign comes, it will be established what a dictator he was, and that they spend more time thieving than governing. And so a political election time and new atmosphere.
Over there who are committed to speak with veracity the opposition I had raised to this piece of legislation being introduced. The bill, the law, the 2009 law was passed in the National Assembly. My learned friend and I sat on this side of the house, next to each other. He told us that it rattled his soul. Well, I was sitting right there. I didn't feel or hear any rattle. But more important, I have the record of how we voted. I have the record, the Hansard of how we voted. Because a division was called. You see, when we speak, and we catapult ourselves on pedestals, we must ensure that the record will support us. A division was called in the National Assembly, and I have the votes, and I will read the names of those who voted for. And the list is as follows.
Well, folks, we had a very quick summary of events that happened where we are today. But before we start, I just also want to read something that was posted on Facebook. And it says here, Chief Justice of Guyana, Roxanne George Wiltshire, gave a judgment which will stand the test of time. She was erudite and analytical in her deliberation. Her courage is the courage of someone whose sole interest is in the rule of law and the supremacy of justice. She will look back with pride on this day. The beauty of her soul adds a glow of grace to her face. Her parents are people of class. So, Councillor Anil, I would like to add Mr. Nandlall, and I also see we have Mr. Sase on our network. I would like for you to just shed some light in terms of that proceeding and the role the judge played.
Well, thank you very much. And once again, permit me to say good evening and good afternoon to all your viewers in the diaspora and across Guyana who are joining us. Well, the ruling of the Chief Justice has been publicized, and the declarations made are now well known. If I may be permitted to summarize them, they are as follows. One, the no confidence motion was validly passed. The vote of Charan Das was validly cast. The decision of the Speaker to declare by way of a resolution that no confidence motion was validly passed remains intact. That though Charan Das may be a dual citizen, being a citizen of Canada as well as a citizen of Guyana, that fact, though that dual citizenship is prohibited by the Constitution of Guyana, and although Charan Das's replacement of his name on the list to be elected to the National Assembly and his placement or extraction from that list to sit in the National Assembly are all unlawful and are all in violation of the Constitution. Significantly, his presence there, as defective as it was, and as violative of the Constitution as it was, it did not invalidate his vote because the Constitution itself preserves the validity of the participation of members who are disqualified or not qualified to be in the Assembly, but who may have participated in proceedings. Also, the de facto doctrine is a doctrine that was designed and devised to deal with situations where a person may be invalidly appointed to hold a public office, and if it is subsequently found that his appointment was illegal or invalid, the acts performed by him while he held that office are not invalidated in law because of the public interest. Then the Chief Justice also dealt with the issue of whether 33 votes constituted a majority of 65. She rejected all the arguments of the Attorney General that 33 votes was not a majority. She rejected the argument that the no confidence motion provision in the Constitution requires some special treatment over and above other matters. She rejected the argument that it requires an absolute majority. In fact, she says, whether you call it an absolute majority, an extraordinary majority, a simple majority, the question remains what constitutes that majority. And she ruled by reviewing the authorities which we submitted and by reviewing the arguments which we advanced. She upheld our arguments and ruled that 33 votes constituted a majority, and that was sufficient to pass the no confidence motion. She also pronounced that by virtue of Article 106 of the Constitution, because of the successful passage of the no confidence motion and because of the fact that the no confidence motion was validly passed in accordance with the Constitution, then the government is taken to have resigned upon the successful passage of the motion, that is on the 21st of December 2019. She further ruled that the government, notwithstanding its defeat by virtue of the no confidence motion, remains in office by virtue of Article 107 of the 106(7) of the Constitution, and must fix a date for election in accordance with that article within 3 months of the date of the no confidence motion, and that the government will remain in office until that new government, a new president is sworn in, consequent or pursuant to those elections. So in a nutshell, I believe that I have summarized the different rulings of the Chief Justice.
Ask for some clarity that makes Charandas vote legal. And there was some specificity in the law of Guyana that says that if you don't object within the 28 days when the election, when that nomination is done, then it's too late.
Let me
so
deal
can you
that.
elaborate on that,
law,
please?
Yes. The jurisdiction which the court has in election matters is a special jurisdiction. It's not a jurisdiction of the court exercising its normal civil jurisdiction to hear matters or its normal criminal jurisdiction. The historical evolution of this jurisdiction can be traced back to this special jurisdiction being once exercised by the House of Representatives in England, and all of us in the Commonwealth territories inherited our legal system from England. This was a special jurisdiction that used to be enjoyed by the House of Commons in England, and in 1866, the House of Commons transferred this special jurisdiction to the High Court with special rules, special legislation, and special principles of law governing the exercise of this jurisdiction. And when the judge, when that transferal was done, the law, the rules that was transferred to govern this jurisdiction laid out a procedure how these challenges must be made, and it laid out the time frame by which they must be launched, and they also provide that the rules and the procedures are mandatory and they suffer no departure. In other words, if there is any violation of time frames or procedure or any of the conditionalities imposed in this unique framework of litigation, rules, and legislation, then that can be fatal to the legislation. So, in a nutshell, our procedures, our law in relation to election matters and the qualification of a person to be elected to sit in the National Assembly falls within that ambit. Our law says that such a challenge must be commenced by way of an election petition and must be commenced within 28 days after the declaration of the election results by the chairman of the Elections Commission. What we had here is the ordinary rules of court being invoked, and the case was presented as an ordinary civil case outside of that 28-day period. In fact, 3.5 years later. And I objected to that the court had no jurisdiction to entertain the challenge at this belated stage, and I invoked all the history and all the law and the principles governing the special jurisdiction of the court, and I cited case law authorities both from Guyana and throughout the Caribbean and the Commonwealth to show that we in Guyana the court enjoys the same rule, the same special jurisdiction as other countries historical circumstance enjoyed. Countries in Africa, countries in India, Asia, Australia, the entire Caribbean, we have a similar historical experience when it comes to this issue, and the laws and the cases determined in those territories are applicable to Guyana, as well as Guyanese cases, and they show they want to support the positions which we were advocating. So the judge really did not have any choice in the matter but to reject the application made on that ground. Of course, because of the importance of the national issues raised in the matter, Her Honor proceeded to address them because she felt, rightly so, that these are matters that are so fundamental to the democratic construct of our country, so fundamental to the constitutional democracy of our country, that they should be addressed and addressed conclusively by a court of competent jurisdiction, as was directed by the Speaker when the matter was first referred to the Speaker. So I believe that the judge did her national duty, if you want to say that. She discharged her jurisdiction in the High Court because there were matters of national importance that came to her involving issues of high significance, and I believe that she dealt with them, and she dealt with them in accordance with the Constitution and in accordance with our submissions which we made to her. So I agree with almost every single ruling which she made, because almost every single ruling that she made was in accordance with the submissions which we made to her.
Well, having said that, which is many words, I would like to ask Sase if he could add some comments on the proceedings that took place there, and what are your thoughts on it, sir?
Good evening, or good afternoon to the Diaspora, and good afternoon to those in Guyana who are looking. I can't add anything to the esteemed Mr. Nandlall. He is one of the foremost experts in law. But what I can say is, and he did actually clearly outline the points that I heard the Chief Justice said. But what I can say is that in any society, and I'm looking at it from the way the public is looking at it, not from the legal fraternity, any society, we operate from a construct of we must wrong nothing by doing judicial injuries to the people. The people is protected by a framework called the Constitution, which we all know about. And those in that document has clearly outlined clauses and articles and sub paragraphs, which clearly defines the framework that we operate as a people, unless we operate outside of that. What I felt as a Guyanese when I was listening to what the Chief Justice was saying was how clear she was in her interpretation of the Constitution. And Guyana must be very grateful to the Honorable Chief Justice acting, Madam Roxanne George. And for this discussion, I'll refer to it in future as CJ. So Guyana must be grateful to the CJ for putting things in their rightful places. So quite an extensive judgment, which I believe will be a permanent landmark in the annals of Guyana's history, and not just Guyana's history, because this judgment had ramification for the entire Caribbean. As people would know, there's a Jamaican situation that this court did actually help. And as Anil Nandlall outlined, she ruled on three major issues: Compton Reed, Christopher Ram's issue, and of course what the AG is saying. But as somebody who is in love with mathematics, I was really pleased with the way she disabused and put to rest this whole concept of what is a majority. And she went into several examples of how 33 in all shapes and form constitutes a majority in the Guyana Nationalist Assembly. I remember she saying, if there's 45 members in the House, and 33 voted for a motion, the motion is passed. If there's 55 members in the House and 33 members voted for the motion is passed. If there's 65 members in the House and 33 again voted for the motion is passed. So this put to rest the Jumbie mathematics, I would say, that was constructed by people who I thought were, well schooled in the art of law, to come up with 34, and it was almost comical to see a video of the Honorable Prime Minister trying to explain how 34 magically became the majority and not 33. So for me, this actually put to rest once and for all that the legislator spoke, the judiciary is now agreeing with the legislator, and it's only a matter of time that the third arm of the country, of the government, falls in line, and which is the executive, and accept the Constitution in all its shapes and forms.
Well, thank you again very much, Sase. Just for information to the general public, Aubrey Norton had made a commitment to be with us, and he had also indicated to us that he was on his way to Linden. So I was using my technical knowledge, having a friend by the name of Oren Gordon, who is very connected in Linden. But unfortunately, it seems as though we have a technological hitch, and I'm hoping with all these connectivity we have in Guyana, Aubrey can join us as the program continues on. Well, the question is this also, is that she made some ruling about the duality of the members of parliament, which it may not have implication for the current parliament, but all future activity. Can you shed some clarity on that? And if the Constitution is not amended, what will be happening?
All right. But before I come in there to deal with that, Sase mentioned a very important thing that I should have explained earlier. In terms of the majority, what the Chief Justice correctly ruled was she looked at the provision, and the provision says majority of all of the elected members. And the examples to which Sase has alluded are in relation to all elected members. So what she was saying that, look, what this thing means is that there are 65 members and 33 is the majority. Whether you have 45 of those members present or whether you have 55 of those members present, it's not a majority of the present, but it's a majority of all the members. And of course, she found that 33 is a majority of all the members present and voting. And that's an important, very fine distinction that we must appreciate. Now, to deal with the question which you have raised, the Chief Justice said correctly that Sharon Das's placement, the placement of his name on the list was illegal from the inception. It was illegal and unconstitutional from the inception. Therefore, everything which flowed thereafter is unconstitutional. The only reason why it was saved, its validity was saved, was because of Article 165(2) and Article and the de facto doctrine. Now, the deeper ramifications are going to be this. They are manifold. One, we already have on the public record a number of ministers of the government who are similarly circumstanced. You have powerful ministers. You have the President's son-in-law, Mr. Gaskin. You have Carl Greenidge, Foreign Affairs Minister. You have Joseph Harmon, Minister of State. Now, if you are going to just take these three, a court has pronounced that, without naming them, a court has pronounced on the principle that they are illegally functioning as ministers. That is the implication of the court's ruling, because they are not technocratic ministers. They were appointed ministers because they were elected members who were extracted from a list, placed in the parliament, and appointed ministers of the government. So, if the Chief Justice, as the Chief Justice ruling is, that the entire placement on the list, extraction on the, from the list, etc., are unconstitutional, it means that their appointment as ministers are unconstitutional. But the important thing is that they continue now, after a judicial pronouncement from a court of competent jurisdiction, they are continuing to function as ministers after that pronouncement. The implications there are profound. So that's the first thing. Secondly, we have a situation where there are, as the Chief Justice said, Cabinet resigned by operation of law, or was resigned by operation of law, operation of the constitutional provision, on the 21st of December 2018. This cabinet from then to now continued to sit, and perhaps, I don't know, they may be sitting Tuesday, because there is no indication from them that they are going to comply with anything that the Chief Justice has said. Billions of dollars of contracts would have been reviewed by this cabinet and entered into by some of these ministers, whose presence as ministers have now by implication declared to be unlawful. So you have another profound set of ramifications which will flow from that. Then you have a third issue of, if it is decided that the life of Parliament or the life of the government has to be extended, then Parliament has to be convened to grant this extension. This will necessarily require these same persons who are now suffering from the disability as per the ruling of the Chief Justice, who will now go back to sit in the Parliament. I am not sure how that will happen. Of course, the PPP suffers from the same disability as well. So you have these important ramifications and the consequences flowing. And in addition to that, for the future elections, and we are now preparing for that, and we are, as part of your preparation, you now have to compile your lists of candidates, both regionally, because you have regional elections and national elections. And, you now have to take into account the pronouncements of the learned Chief Justice in compiling that list. It would be absolutely reckless for one now to put on the list persons who suffer the disability of enjoying dual citizenship. Of course, this one solution, I don't know how much this will be a solution for the future. I can't at this point in time remark whether it will undo what has been done already, is to consider amendment of the Constitution, if that is how the political parties wish to address the matter. But that's a matter that will have to be decided upon, because the particular provisions of the Constitution require a 2/3 majority to amend. So both parties will have to agree if that is the way forward. But so I have addressed in a nutshell there the various implications which flow from that dual citizenship, the pronouncements of the Chief Justice on the question of dual
I
citizenship.
would like to actually ask you to emphasize on another aspect, and that would be in the area of where you're only citing so far key members of the APNU coalition team that have dual citizenship. But if I'm not mistaken, we have quite a few people within the PPP leadership. Would you be able to tell us which members within the current PPP structure that is also of dual citizenship?
In my explanation just now, I did allude to the presence of PPP members of parliament who are dual citizens as well. And I said, of course, that the same principles will have to apply to them. They can't be treated any differently. The leader of the opposition disclosed at one of his press conferences that there are two of such persons. I believe he named Adrian Anamaya and Gail Teixeira. I think he named those, and I saw in the news that Gail Teixeira has indicated that she is prepared to relinquish that the citizenship to Canada.
Now, having said that, Sase, I'm pretty sure that you will also like to shed some additional light onto that matter.
I want to speak specifically to the fact of the spending of the budget based on the interpretation of this entire constitution. Let's be very clear. Ministers don't sign contracts. Contracts are signed by the head of the budget agencies, which is usually the permanent secretary. So I want to use this forum to, as I did before, but issue clear notification and warning. I think it's extremely important that permanent secretary understands that there's consequences for signing any contract after December 21st, 2018. And the consequences will be dire for them. And they need to understand, they need to start getting into the mode of understanding this is a caretaker mode, and all they should be doing is doing what you call the maintenance activity, like paying people their salaries, continuing projects that are already opened and making those progress payments, like the Chedijagan International Airport. That contract has already been signed prior to the no confidence motion. So implementation continues. But I saw yesterday, for example, the Ministry of Public Infrastructure signed a huge contract with a contractor, and the permanent secretary was there signing away after December 21st, 2018. That permanent secretary stand to be surcharged and financially exposed if the future government of Guyana decides to take legal measures against them. So that point I want to really, really come out on. The other thing I want to flag is the moral question around the diaspora. The diaspora numbers about 520,000 Guyanese, born Guyanese, who resides in many countries of the world. They contributed in 2012 over $400 million in remittances back to the country. In 2018, it had dropped almost $100 million, and that's because the diaspora in generally has lost confidence in the current administration. So about $280 to $290 million was transmitted back to Guyana in 2018. Big difference, but it is still a material cash inflow into the economy. It's actually the second largest productive sector of that derives foreign currency for Guyana, behind gold. And hence, this whole concept of dual citizenship we got to respect the Constitution, and no one should be violating the Constitution. But I believe it's imperative on all the political players, all the civil society players, to really understand whether they want to be narrow-minded and stay in a little pond, or they want to engage in this whole concept of globalization, whereby, like every country, Israel is a great example of how they've engaged the diaspora for development, and make sure that there is some scope for opportunities for the dual citizens, the diaspora, to partake in the affairs of Guyana. I do not believe that the diaspora should dominate. Guyana should be in a situation whereby those who are domiciled in Guyana should have the lead. Say, for example, nobody who is a dual citizen should ever be the president of Guyana or the prime minister of Guyana. But people should be allowed to serve. And if they're not, then people lose interest and they bury their talent into their diaspora district. So there is a lot of, and I'm glad that Anil said that the two main parties will have to, if they do see a need, discuss whether there's going to be any constitutional change, which will require a two-third vote, which is 44 members. So my question, my advocacy is, because in 2011, I remember when I was campaigning, the AFC at that time had committed to the diaspora that if they won elections, and they did not, they were going to amend the constitution or take with the other parties to make sure that there's some limited role for the diaspora in national affairs, but not dominance, but a limited role.
Well, from what you have alluded to, there are a couple of issues that we will take, and that will be from the constitutional amendment and diaspora engagement. But we have a live audience here, and we would like to open it so that our audience can participate in the town hall meeting. So here, you're not filtered, but please don't make a speech, just give a question.
Okay, first we have a question from our Facebook Live audience. That's for Mr. Nandlall. What do the PPP intend to do if elections are not held by March 19th?
That question is currently receiving active consideration by the PPP's leadership. We are going to do everything possible to ensure that there are elections within the constitutionally prescribed time frame. We plan, for example, on Tuesday to have a massive protest in front of GCOM, because we are of the firm view that GCOM can be ready to hold elections within the time stipulated. We are of the firm view that there is a usable list of acceptable standards. We are of the firm view that we have trained sufficient people, and the machinery just concluded a successful local government elections less than 2 months ago, and therefore there is absolutely no sensible reason why elections can't be held within the time stipulated. As you are aware, the leader of the opposition has been engaging the international community. We, as a party, through the leader of the opposition, who is also the general secretary, and through myself and various other persons, various other leaders, we have said that once that time expires, then the government enters into uncharted waters. The government becomes illegal. It becomes unconstitutional. It becomes illegitimate, and it will be treated that way. The diplomatic community, we expect that they will treat it that way. The international community will treat it that way. CARICOM is expected to intervene and to issue some guidelines. Sase made reference to Caribbean politicians expressing great anxieties and apprehension in relation to the situation in Guyana. I know for a fact that many politicians in the region are keeping a close eye on Guyana. Of course, we have the explosive Venezuelan situation, which is next door, and I don't think that it will be in the interest of this hemisphere to have Venezuela in that state and Guyana in a state of illegal rule. So while I can't choreograph or in any way project with any a special specificity the actions that are going to be taken, what I know as a matter of principle, we will be treating, our supporters will be advised to treat the government as illegitimate and illegal. Of course, it will not be merely omission to act and just a declaration that they are illegal. Actions will unfold to manifest our position. That those actions will be publicized at the appropriate time as we are now discussing them. You have to take into account that we are doing 100 different things at the same time. We still have to prepare for elections. We still have to satisfy a host of legal requirements in preparation for the election. We still have to get the party machinery up and running. We still have to get activists and do flyers and do paraphernalia and everything that is associated with the election, and then deal with this constitutional catastrophe that is looming. So it's a lot of work with not a lot of people to assist.
Well, that tells you that there's 1.3 million Guyanese in the world, and because of only 750,000 of them in Guyana, it really, you've highlighted the need where the locals in Guyana really need to embrace the diaspora even more, so that we can collectively protect and preserve this democracy that was fought for so hard and won in 1992.
Well, let me just add for clarity. There is some sort of dispute on those numbers that have been thrown out. Our diaspora here in New York City is ranked number 5 in New York City as the newest New Yorker, and in Queens, Guyanese are ranked number 2. Now, our numbers can be much more staggering than what was projected there, because a Guyanese is anyone who has a parent that has a Guyanese birth certificate. Even though you might be a U.S. citizen, the mere fact that you are born in Guyana, your children has the right to call themselves Guyanese. Now, with that, we have a question on the floor, and Mr. Chris Prasad will take the floor.
Mr. Moderator, gentlemen, it's relieving to hear the questions being answered today, and a very sensible decision being ruled by the Chief Justice, which I hope going forward with calm and sensible decision going forward for the benefit of Guyana. It is laughable to hear about the diaspora only when there is election time, because once the election is passed, you don't hear from any politician, regardless what side of the aisle they are, about the diaspora. And Mr. Sase, you have alluded to the fact that the Guyanese have contributed second to the GDP next to the Guyana Rice Board.
Gold.
The Gold Board, sorry, thank you. And now is the time that Guyana is in a crisis. Again, there are many political parties, there are many humanitarian organizations abroad, and they're political in different disrespect. I just want to announce here now that only prior to Mr. Charanda's vote, we had no intention of what Guyana was going to encounter with this no confidence vote, that we as concerned Guyanese got together again before December 21st and form an organization, a non-political organization called the Guyanese Overseas United. And the reason we formed that organization is to get the representation and the backing of Guyanese abroad, which is a population of over 550,000 in the UK, Canada, and the United States. And it is to represent the voiceless in Guyana, the people who cannot speak for themselves, because when government are in power, they make their decision for themselves. So Guyanese Overseas United formed about a month ago. We're moving forward with the support as an umbrella group with other organizations, whether they're politically aligned or not. If you look at all the organizations, they all have a commonality that they want the betterment for Guyana and for the people of Guyana. So what we're asking is that now that you have acknowledged the diaspora, we're going to be here in your face telling you that we would like the government of Guyana, before constitutional reform, to acknowledge the diaspora. We want to be part in policy making, and we want you to govern the country for the benefit of all of Guyana, all races of Guyana. We want you to, your policies must be fair, there must be free and fair election, and there must be equality for all. So again, with the crisis in Guyana, we hope that before the next election, that those changes could be adhered to, and we want to be acknowledged. We want to be part in those policy making. We look forward to hear from you again. I have here with me David Correa, one of our co-founder of Guyana Overseas United. And finally, Guyana Overseas United is founded by members that represent all ethnic groups. We are not no politically aligned. We are not no one race. We represent and we're part of each ethnic group in Guyana, and we're looking forward for the best of Guyana.
Chris, I would like to have a question, though. I understand you have to promote your organization, but we need a question.
Oh, my question to you is, thank you. Now that you have talked about the diaspora, we want to know what part that you want the diaspora to participate in. And we're saying that we want to be participate in policy making. So how will you address that?
Okay,
sir,
before you add to that, I just want to add for clarity, there are other organizations that I'm privy to, and just for completeness, it's called the United Guyanese Diaspora Global Network Corp. What is interesting about this group, it is very diverse and broad-based, and as of Friday, there was an engagement with the State Department to talk about the limitations of importations and to be able to set up activities so that the foreign governments could
You
actually...
are doing the same thing that you accuse the young man of doing.
Well, no, I'm
Promoting
giving an information. No, the question is this, is that Guyanese overseas are not, we call, say, passive and allowing things to happen willy-nilly in Guyana, because we also have political clout here in the United States, and we intend to ask our congressmen
from Guyana
to actually push.
And creating the impression as though these things, you are speaking on the assumption that a lot of those things that a lot of the accusation and the insinuation which are being made are predicated upon facts. And I would like, before you continue, to intervene and to say to the young man, Chris, and to yourself, that speaking for the PPP and speaking for myself, we have always respected and regarded the diaspora as a significant developmental partner, and we have always cultivated strong political and other ties with the diaspora. We have organizations and support groups in many, many parts of North America where they are Guyanese. Our presidential candidate is currently in New York. You know, he was supposed to be in Canada, and that's one of the very first engagements that the PPP sought to do. And that by itself, without more, is a manifestation of our commitment to the diaspora. So I say that to you for you to understand and to remove from your mind any doubt whatsoever that the diaspora, the importance of the diaspora is not respected. We know the role that the diaspora has played historically in the restoration of democracy in Guyana. We have been engaging the diaspora in this fight to remove what we believe is going to be unconstitutional rule, and we have been doing that while we were in government, maintained this relationship, and we have even intensified it while we are in opposition. I was in New York during the summer, and I held engagements with hundreds of Guyanese throughout the length and breadth of New York. So please be assured that we are not oblivious of the importance of the diaspora, and our manifesto is currently being crafted and will address the role of the diaspora in terms of where we go in the future.
Well, I would like to add a question that was texted to me, and this is from Mr. Pepe, better known as Shadid. His question is as follows, and this is a question for Mr. Anil Nandlall. If elections isn't held by March 19, what are the plans of PPP? People would like to know what will happen in this scenario.
We answered that already.
The fact is this, is that what I'm getting at is that we have a timetable that is done by the Constitution, which is on a date. There are two legal options that have been aired. So what plans do you as a PPP have to make sure that a 90-day rule is being observed, or to be able to be within the ambits of the law?
Well, you have to understand that we are dealing with a government which has demonstrated historically that they have little regard for democracy and the rule of law. You know that they have remained in power for 28 years via rigged elections. So I don't, as I answer that question, but if you are asking me for what are we going to do, I mean, I can't articulate that as I sit here, but we are not going to accept the government. We're not going to regard it as legal, and there are going to be a series of activities, protest actions, and all sorts of things going forward in relation to how we treat it. The diaspora, we expect to play a significant role as well in highlighting this matter internationally.
I'm not speaking on behalf of the PPP because I'm not a member of the PPP, but I want to make this very clear. There's two things that are very vital for Guyana at this point in time. GCOM takes center stage now, but let's make this very clear. GCOM is not responsible for calling the elections. The elections are called by the president constitutionally. It is his job. He can't hide from that role. He cannot run away from that role. We are paying him over 20 million Guyana dollars a year plus benefits to do a job. And that is his role to do that. Now, but GCOM has a role to facilitate the instructions of the president to say, let's call an election. GCOM has a list that is valid and that is good as gold at this point in time, that remains valid and in place until April 30th. I was watching the press conference of the leader of the opposition, former President Bharat Jagdeo, where he said that there is enough time between now and March 21st for GCOM to put everything in place to have illegitimate elections. The reason I believe and I agree with him would be that GCOM has just held a successful local government elections that that was managed in a geographical area that ran from Point Playa in the north of Guyana. If those of you who know the Northwest District, which encompasses Mabaruma, Matthews Ridge, and coming down, all the way to Crabwood Creek, where more than 90% of Guyana live. So GECOM has already managed the machinery to cover 90% of the people. That machinery was tested in November, which is only a few months ago, and it's in place. All GECOM has to do now is logistically build out a machinery. Furthermore, GECOM also, in that same November machinery, worked a system from Georgetown to Linden, and in population areas like Bartica, not Maburuma, Bartica, Letem, and the capital of Region 8. So GECOM has already covered all the population centers in November. All they have to do now is build out a machinery into the remote Amerindian villages. And that is easy to do. You can do that in 4 to 6 weeks. Because the machinery you use for elections in Guyana are the teachers, are the village elders. Those people are already in place. Many of them have already worked in previous elections, and hence it's just a refreshing of their capacity to function in an upcoming elections. So the list is there. The machinery is generally there for 90% of the people. All you have to do is build out 10% more to cover the other remote areas. And this can be held. But I believe there's a systematic effort within GECOM at the highest level to undermine democracy when they were supposed to be the tools of democracy. They are actually now the inhibitors of democracy. And there are consequences because the world is moving in a direction where majority of our global citizens are in societies that are democratic. Guyana, if it passes March 21st without the support of the opposition to extend that time, will be going into, as Anil said, uncharted waters, which is actually, in my terms, undemocratic territories, which will give us, we will now become friends with places like North Korea and Burundi and you know, those countries, Equatorial Guinea. Those are the kind of countries Guyana will now be sharing a common set of values with, where you have maximum leaders, one man making all the decisions for the entire nation. That is not democracy. So a lot of things got to be, in summary, we must ensure that the people understand, irrespective of what Vincent Alexander and all the others are saying, the list is valid and good until April 30th. Guyana can hold an election with that list.
With that, I have some questions here from the audience, and I would like to ask the microphone to go to this young man, Vijay.
Thank you very much. I think Sase already addressed one of the points I wanted to make, right, was that, you know, the fact that if we do have elections coming up in 3 months' time, and I heard that the opposition or the government wants to do house-to-house re-registration of voters' lists, that might take a long time. But as Sase alluded to, we already completed local government elections with a valid electoral list, which should be okay. The other question I want to ask, if any one of the two erudite personality on that side of the microphone would subscribe to the idea that any political party now contesting the new elections rid their candidacy from any persons of dual citizenship, just to prevent such a situation from happening again. If they, because remember, once your name is on that list, you are eligible to get into parliament. Would you subscribe to that, and what can we do to let these parties know that, look, in view of the CJ's ruling, let's get our house together or in order? Thank you. Anyone of you could address?
Well, I did say earlier that it would be highly reckless of any political leader to put on a list of representatives the names of dual citizens in light of the Chief Justice's ruling. Unless, of course, there is amendment done to the Constitution.
I have nothing to add to it because I believe that the parties will need to do some soul searching and understand what are their core values. I mean, Guyana is dominated by the PNC and the PPP, so I suspect when those two parties, their leadership meet and they do some soul searching and reflection on the issues, they will come to a conclusion of what they have to do or not do. So I want to leave it up to these parties to decide the way forward on that matter.
With that, I have another question here from the audience. Okay,
let me just add quickly that this issue of dual citizenship has assumed great importance now and is the subject of discussions all across the media, the social media, and at different fora. And the two parties recognize that. I speaking with the PPP, at least I know that we recognize that. And it's not a decision that will be made without consultation. So we will have to consult because it's a matter of great importance. And the consultation will extend to having some involvement or input from the diaspora as it will affect the diaspora. So at least we can give, I can allude to that because it is a matter of great importance and it is assuming significant space in public discourse now.
Well, with that, I have a question here from our audience. If you could stand up.
Since the CJ upheld the no confidence motion, it means then that the government now is just running the country until election is announced. However, if Parliament does anything after this ruling, anything that they do will be inconsistent with the Constitution and therefore should be ruled null and void. Is this a right interpretation?
The Chief Justice, as I have articulated before, would render the government in a very peculiar state. The government, last night I was speaking on a television program. First of all, let me recognize the reality that this government is yet to issue a public statement or to make a public utterance that would suggest that it considers its powers altered because of the no confidence motion. That the Chief Justice has ruled and made some other pronouncements, including validating the no confidence motion, has not resulted in a change of approach from the government. So this government believes that it will continue in office with all its powers intact, as if the no confidence motion has not been passed. Last night on a television program, I described the situation as this. This government is like a patient on a life-saving machine. That life-saving machine is Article 106, subparagraph 7 of the Constitution, which says that notwithstanding its defeat, the government shall remain in office and shall hold elections. A government in such a state, like a patient on a life-saving machine, can never have the vitality and strength of a person who is healthy. Perhaps that is the most graphical way or graphic way of explaining the situation. As Sase said, and as I said from the beginning, the government is to maintain public order and to perform the basic functions which a government is expected to perform in relation to a state. Public transportation, public defense, pay public officers, public health care, public transportation, etc., etc. Bare minimum functions until you go to office, until you go to the elections. This government is not displaying is not giving any evidence or any indication that it is prepared to go along that route. In fact, I know for a fact that the president met with senior functionaries of the government and has indicated to them that the government is going nowhere and that business will be as usual, and that they are not politicians and they must not be distracted with the political discourse taking place in the media. I know that for a fact. So we have a battle on our hands here. How far they will go, I am not sure. But the person asks about Parliament. Parliament doesn't feature in this equation. Parliament ought to be in closing down mode. Parliament's only role in this period is if the two sides agree that they will extend the life of the government. That's the only role that Parliament has to play. In fact, the obligation is now on the President to issue what is called a proclamation to dissolve Parliament. That is his, and fix the date for elections. That is what the Constitution says is required of him. But as I indicated, you are not seeing any such movement or posture coming from the side of the government. In fact, whilst just after the Chief Justice ruled, the Attorney General was heard to say that we are going to remain in government and there is no court that could take us out. So that was not a public statement, but that was a statement made in the precincts of the court. So this is the reality you have to deal with.
Now, we also have another question here from our friend at the back. His name eludes me at this point, but he will identify himself and then ask a question.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Carl Davis. Is the government considering appealing the Chief Justice ruling?
That's the question, yes. The government has indicated through the Attorney General that the government will be appealing the Chief Justice several rulings. In fact, the government is in a state of confusion because when the Compton Reed decision was handed down, now this is a case which was filed by a farmer, private citizen. And this private citizen, as I said before in other public fora, is one of the most powerful farmers perhaps on the earth. Because in a matter of days after the constitutional confidence motion was filed, this private citizen was able to retain perhaps the most expensive lawyer in the country, was able to get all Charan Das's documents out of Canada, all his passports and application forms for those passports. He was able to get Charan Das's travel record out of Guyana and entering Guyana. He was able to get a lawyer from Canada to swear an affidavit giving expert opinion on the laws of Canada in relation to swearing of allegiance. And this guy is a farmer. Then you have, after the Chief Justice made the ruling,
On that
the
note,
Prime
before you continue, Jimmy
Isn't that a
Carter,
strategy?
Jimmy
That's a strategy
Carter.
for delaying elections.
Before you add to that, Jimmy Carter also was a farmer.
No, I'm not knocking farmers. I'm just telling you how powerful the reach that this farmer has. But most importantly, when the Chief Justice ruled, remember she gave 3 rulings and they came like an hour after each other because the judgments were quite lengthy. When the Campton Reed judgment was handed down, the Prime Minister went on NCN and says that the government will appeal. The government didn't file the case, how the government will appeal? But that is the incestuous state of affair with these proceedings.
Isn't that a valid reason for delaying elections, the appealing of the government to the Caribbean Court of Justice?
As I have said, the constitutional time can't be stopped by a court. The Attorney General tried to get a stay of execution, thinking that by getting that, he will somehow be able to stop the constitutional clock from ticking. There is no court that has the power to stop that time. All the power that the court has is what the Constitution has given to the court. And in this instance, if the Constitution wanted court to extend that time, the Constitution would have reposed that power in the court. The Constitution has reposed the power in the Parliament. So any extension of time can only be given, can only be granted by that branch of government. The Constitution deliberately kept that power away from the judiciary. So any judge that purports to extend that time will be acting in violent conflict with the Constitution and will be trampling upon the doctrine of separation of powers, because it is the legislature that has been given that power to extend that time. The framers of the Constitution were not blinkered in that they set a time frame and expect that everything is going to be okay and the time frame must be met, or else all hell break loose. The framers of the Constitution exercise great sagacity and wisdom. They provided for an extension to be done, but that extension they did not give the court the power. They resided it in the Parliament.
The president consistently violating Constitution. First of all, he appointed his own guy for Guy-com chairman, despite the fact that the opposition leader Jagdeo presented a list. But he know all along that he wanted his own man. So maybe with that instance, that is why he consider himself, maybe he could do whatever he feels like, and PP will not make any further step.
Well, one of the things that I recognized looking at the operations of the government is that it keeps rebounding to me all the time. Same old operation from the pre-1992 days, whereby a select few decides how to massage the Constitution and try to work it to their benefit. The point is, as Anil quite clearly stated, the Constitution is already designed, it's already framed, and it is clear. But one of the challenges that Mr. Granger will find himself in, His Excellency the President, Mr. Granger, will, and he is, just for clarification, he is still the President until March 20th, 2019, or unless he so dissolves the Parliament before and then call the elections. But he has a time window of 90 days to maintain the government, resign his cabinet, resign himself, but being in the role as the caretaker president until those 90 days are up. Now, the big challenge remains is what happens after March 21st, 2019, It is a unique situation because I do not think there is any other country in the Caribbean or Caribbean.
Say sorry. We have other questions and we're running out of time here. So we have a question for you that is what is your view on a third party to bring a sensible balance in the House?
Well, I ran in 2011 on an AFC ticket, so I more than anyone is well placed to answer such a question because I was in that third force. My big concern is the risk at this point in time, and the risk meaning I have seen a group of men who in 2011 had a collection of honorable ideals of being the balance of power, of being trying to manage these two elephants in the room called the PPP and the PNC to adhere completely and totally to a framework of good governance. What I have seen since 2015 is that balance of power has become nothing but a rubber stamp and has sold the entire ideal of being the balance of power down the river. The question is, if we look at all the third parties, we got to ask some basic questions. How different are they from what the
Say sorry,
was?
we're running out of time. I just need to know, do you support it or not?
Well, in 2020, I do not support third party. I believe that the PPP and the PNC are the elephants in the room, and they represent more than 90% of the population. And I believe that I want to endorse one of these two big parties.
Okay. I'm very sorry, but this question was actually for Mr. Nandlall, and I would ask that you please keep your answer to less than 2 minutes because we're really running out of time. The question again was. The question again was, what is your view on a third party to bring a sensible balance in the House?
I am a Democrat. I welcome 100 new parties. Give the people as many choices as they wish, and the better party will win the election.
Okay, we have another question. Prior to the 2016 election, the perception was that the PPP arrogance had skyrocketed. What can we expect from PPP in that area of arrogance if PPP win government?
Well, we have had several public statements that were made on that question of the contention that you are arrogant, etc. I have been in government since 2011. I don't know if people felt that I am arrogant. I don't think I'm arrogant. And perhaps that feeling of mine is an arrogant feeling. So I don't know. But I believe that people have seen us in opposition. And we have managed, fortunately, to amass great public support. We have not lost support. We have gained support. So I trust the judgment of the people out there. If it's such huge numbers, it means that, they accept us. But I never thought that we were arrogant. I never thought so. But, wrong impressions can easily be conveyed.
Now, going forward, we have ourselves now the impasse that was created by the no vote. And it permeates itself into our society where now there is some vagueness about the specificity of election before March 19th. Can there be another meeting within the leaders of both of these parties to come to an understanding in the interest of the country to have that date be written in stone and stop all this legal mumbo-jumbo?
Let me jump in quickly because the leader of the opposition has already made a statement on that. He said that the only time he will be meeting with His Excellency the President is on the matter of the date of the elections. And whatever mechanisms will need to be facilitated to have that elections held. So I'm actually very happy that he had such clarity.
Anil, you want to add some additional information on that, please?
Our position is that we will not engage for the purpose of giving the president and the government photo opportunities to show that we are dialoguing and discussing. We have made it very clear that the agenda will have to be approved first and satisfy us that it is genuine and that it is directed towards the holding of elections, either within the constitutionally prescribed time frame or at the shortest possible time thereafter. And if that agenda does not address that in a clear and cogent manner and decisive manner, then we are not going to engage the government. It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
I agree.
Well, it seems as though that is a general sentiment of most that have been from the diaspora, and I'm pretty sure that you will see the groundwork there in Guyana expressing the same concern. Now, we have here a situation also where the people's business is on hold because we in the United States had a situation where for 31 days our government was shut down and we really did not have much of an activity. There are consequences and implication when the government is in this gray area. Could you shed some light in terms of some of the dangers that we face with having this lack of governance?
Well, you don't have a government that is at full strength, and that by itself can't be a state of permanence. That can be a way countries, because international interactions are going to be limited with you. We live in a global world. There are international financing that is necessary for massive capital projects and developmental projects that will not come if the government is not properly installed. You have international obligations that you have to discharge, which are going to be jeopardized. Contracts are not contracts of worth will not be entered in because their legal status will become dubious. Investments not come to a land where the government is uncertain or the government is a caretaker government. We have other issues which of national importance, of territorial significance, that are being addressed at the World Court, that are being addressed at different fora. That doesn't put us as a country in a safe place if we don't have a strong government. So there's a multiplicity of reasons why this cannot be a desirable situation continuing for a long period of time. The quicker we bring this to an end. And I don't know what the problem is. Not that the government, the current government is going to automatically lose power unless they have convinced themselves that they have no hope of winning elections. Because it's an election we are going to. You're not asking them to give up on putting the PPP. We are going to an elections, and if they win the election, they continue in office. Are they so afraid of elections? I mean, that's the question you have to ask. I thought that they are a very popular force. If you hear the Prime Minister speak, you think he's the best thing after Jesus Christ. So I don't know why they're afraid of the electorate.
I just want to add that there's a big issue that
Sase, 1 second. Sase, 1 second. Sase, 1 second, please.
Yes, we're about to go into closing statements, but before we do that, we have had polls running throughout our broadcast, and our live audience has voted. The first question was, will you support the APNU coalition? 29% of the people voted yes, 71 voted no. The second question was, will you support PPP going back into government? 55% said yes, 45% said no. And the third question was, will you support a third party to bring a balance between PPP and APNU coalition government? 53% of people said yes, and 47% of people said no. And now I'd like to ask both of you to go ahead and give us your closing statements.
Okay. I would want to say that after March 21st, Guyana will be in illegitimate territory unless free and fair elections and elections free from fear are held. And an illegitimate government, as Anil quite loudly alluded to, means that most importantly for me is that the Venezuelan regime can actually say, we don't have to adhere to your illegitimate government over there. And it can create all kinds of territorial challenges for us at many forums where Venezuela can actually call us out as an illegitimate country with an illegitimate government. So it's very important that we get this fixed soon, before March 21st or by March 21st. Just note that March 21st is Pagua in Guyana, holy. So that would be quite a unique situation if we have a holy Pagua elections. But investment also have already started to run. I've run some numbers around the investments in Guyana, and it has been declining since 2017. And that is not a good place to be, because you cannot create jobs for your people without new investments. So my appeal is this. The government is claiming that it's very popular, and I welcome their popularity. And I'm saying, if you're that popular, surrender yourself to the people who are the supreme collective in the country, and let them make a decision. And even though I will not be endorsing a third party, I agree with Anil, the more the merrier. Let everyone come, because Guyana has to start identifying. We've been a democratic nation long enough now, and we have to start concretizing that principle of free and fair elections, and elections free from fear. And I wish all the players in the elections good luck.
Anil?
Thank you. Permit me once again to thank you for inviting me to be part of this most important discussions. I hope that I have clarified or helped to clarify some of the issues that are troubling people at this point in time. I know that we are going through a very testing period as a people and as a country and as a democracy, and I hope that maturity will prevail. I hope that national interest will prevail over partisan interest. Look, a democracy is something that, whether we want it to work or we don't want it to work. A constitution is simply a book. This thing here is a book. It's it's just paper. But if we want it to work, we can make it work. If we want to remain as part of the civilized world, well, then we can make it work. If we want to trample upon it, well, then we have to deal with the consequences of it as a people. And I'm hoping that the majority of Guyanese will take the civilized democratic road and understand that without the rule of law, without the constitution, without law and order, and without democracy, then we perish as a people and as a country. And we will be condemned to another 100 years of backwardness.
Well, having said that, I must take this opportunity of thanking Globespan for the support work they have been doing to bring these broadcasts week after week. And we must thank Mr. Nohar Singh for the wonderful support he has done for all of us. Of course, we have to thank you, the audience, because you have always been here and been supportive for us, and we want to take the opportunity of thanking all of you to come out on a very cold day today to be here. Again, we will have these type of broadcasts and make sure that you will be notified by the social media. So again, thank you very much.
One more thing before we close out. A lot of our audience online has said that this is a very good program and we need more of this. So we just want to thank you guys again and thank the audience.
And we have pastry. Folks, just for information, for next week's broadcast, we will have a town hall meeting at the same location, and we'll be talking about race and politics in Guyana. There we will have David Hines, Dr. Beto Rambarak, and Salim Nasruddin. Again, it will be at 1 p.m. next week, Saturday, 2 p.m. Guyana time. Oh, I will be just updated. It's going to be 2 p.m. New York time and 3 p.m. Guyana time. Thank you again. Vishnu Mahadio signing off.